let's bring in the jury.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. You may continue with redirect.
Thank you, Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Dorkin.
Good afternoon.
I just have just a few questions, I think, for you with regard to Exhibit 419, and that's the exhibit of the records. That's the exhibit of the history, the internet history that you created on Mr. Alexander's computer, or that you looked at on Mr. Alexander's computer.
Yes.
Is that right? All right. And this was, you said, these entries that we specifically looked at were somewhere between 4 in the morning to 4:35 in the morning?
Yes.
Were there many more entries than that?
In that time frame or in total?
No, total. At the internet history that you looked at.
There were approximately almost 100,000, like 990. It was like 99,000 plus entries.
Okay, and these ones that we specifically looked at in Exhibit 419 had to do with the timing of around 4 or 4:30 in the morning. Is that right?
Correct.
Were you asked to ever look at any of the YouTube videos?
No.
You would ask some questions about a mirror image, the hard drive?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have access to the actual hard drive itself?
Which hard drive are you referring to?
Miss Arias's, the broken one.
The broken one, yes.
Okay. Did you have access to the broken hard drive?
Yes, I had the forensic copy of the broken hard drive.
Did you actually see the broken hard drive also?
Yes.
Okay. And when you got a mirror image of that broken hard drive, is that just something that you can just kind of plug into a computer and any one of us can look at what's on it?
The forensic copy is in a forensic format, so you would need to have a viewer that can view that type of format or the forensic tool that created it.
So, and what kind of viewer did you have?
I have the forensic tool that has a built-in ability to view it called EnCase.
Okay. So is that something that you had to use on the mirror image before you can pull up any of these images?
Yes.
And about how many images or photos were contained on that mirror image of Miss Arias' hard drive?
I'd have to check my record. I don't know that offhand.
Okay. Even about numbers?
I don't know offhand.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I check?
Sure. And let us know what you're referring to.
I'd have to load up one of my CDs. I don't have it preloaded on the computer.
All right, well, let me ask you this way. When you used NCase, did you come up with around over 100 different files?
When I used NCase,
When you used NCase on the mirror image?
of the broken hard drive, I remember there was a very large number, literally thousands of images and files that we recovered.
Okay.
I just can't give you the exact number right now.
That's okay. That's really my question. So there was thousands of images?
Yes, there were thousands of them. It took days to recover the information. I had to run recovery scripts for quite some time.
When you say days, do you mean did you leave the NCase or the recovery program running for days?
Yes.
And is that in order to help it retrieve everything off of the mirror image?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Nothing further.
Looks like we have one question from a juror, perhaps two. Counsel, please approach. Mr. Dworkin, a juror has some questions for you. Are date and time stamps on photos taken by digital cameras able to be manually changed and or manipulated?
Yes.
Could that occur before a photo is taken or after a photo is taken?
The file wouldn't have existed prior to the photo being taken, so you couldn't do it before. The photo or the file would actually have to exist and then go in after the fact and then manipulate it. The only other way to do that would, of course, would be to change the date-time setting in the camera itself.
Any other questions from the jury? Ms. Wilmot, follow up?
Does that apply to exit information as well?
Yes, if the camera's date, you're referring to my comment about the camera's date and time?
Yes.
Yes, if the date and time in the camera is changed, the EXIF can only contain the information that the camera has access to. So if the camera thinks it's a particular date and time, that's what's going to be incorporated in the EXIF data and would also most likely be reflected in the file system data as well.
And when were you able to turn on this Canon camera?
I may have been able to turn it on. I did not attempt to because I knew that the camera had been seized and in storage for quite a long time, and usually the date-time information is lost. And since there wasn't a specific reason to do it at the time, I wasn't asked to, and I did not.
And did you see any evidence of manipulation of time and date stamps?
No, nothing struck me as being out of order. I did do an inspection, a casual or informal inspection. While I looked at the EXIF data, I also looked at the file system data to see if they were out of alignment, and they all seemed to match. So I didn't find anything out of the ordinary or unusual.
All right, thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Mr. Martinez?
Sir, with regard to exhibit number 413, which is one of the photographs, is it possible that, for example, this particular photograph, that it was taken in 2007 and then uploaded or downloaded or whatever it is that one does onto the camera in 2008?
Anything's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the jury? Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Okay.
You may call your next witness.
Thank you. I represent Brian Neumeister.
keep them under the subpoena, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Dorkin, you are still under subpoena.
Can you spell your first and last name for me?
It's Brian, B-R-Y-A-N. Neumeister, N-E-U-M-E-I-S-T-E-R.
Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Please walk right around here and have a seat. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you tell us your name, please?
It's Brian Neumeister, B-R-Y-A-N, N-E-U-M-E-I-S-T-E-R. I'm with USA Forensic.
And what is USA Forensic? What do you do?
We do state-of-the-art audio and video enhancement for trials and for military and other uses.
How long have you been doing that type of work?
I've been working professionally with audio and video for 32 years.
And so what kind of experience do you have in order to forensically do what you do now?
I'm a certified forensic expert in military, federal, state, civil, and aviation courts. I work with the United States District Courts as a contracted technical expert. I worked with the United States Grand Jury as a contracted technical expert.
Mr. Neumeister, let me stop you right there. Are you referring to something?
Pardon?
Are you referring to something as you're telling us?
Yes, I'm just grabbing some highlights off a CV. It makes it easier to remember.
Okay. Could I get that marked? Just
Sure.
so we know what you're looking at.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So you were telling us,
Again,
Your
I work
experience.
with the United States District Courts as a contracted technical expert, United States Grand Jury, contracted technical expert, U.S. Department of Justice, contracted technical expert, a member, and I say I am or have been, and the reason I say that, I never know if the dues are paid up this early in the year, but the Audio Engineering Society, the American College of Forensic Experts, or actually the American College of Forensic Examiners, the American College of Forensic Examiners International, the American Board of Recorded Evidence. I work also with the Department of Defense and contractors on classified and unclassified forensic materials, the Department of Energy, a number of state and local law enforcement agencies. Actually, I'm working with all three agencies involved in this case right now. On different cases, I'm working with the prosecution on a number of other cases. I'm working with your firm, also with the Public Defender's Office, and also with, I believe, Mesa Police is involved in this too. I'm working for Mesa Police. I currently am working on cases for the Phoenix Police Department and the Department of Public Safety Special Investigations Unit. So my basic job is to just sort out the facts so that you have it to work with. I don't really take a side. I just analyze data, and we have 2 labs and we have very high-end equipment. So we're very often, if law enforcement agencies can't do it or need it done quickly, they come to us because we have, where they're operating servers, we're operating fiber optic terra blocks. So we have quite a bit more horsepower than most forensic agencies do.
so it sounds like you work on a lot of different types of cases.
Yeah, I've worked in or for 23 different countries on different cases, and I do work a lot of homicides.
Okay, and when you're talking about work, what type of work are we talking about?
Enhancing audio, for example, 911 calls, people might want to know what's the conversation in the background of the call. What happened in the background? Can you clean up the call? Surveillance video, Can you enhance what's on the surveillance video? Can you recover any video that might have been erased from a surveillance camera? That sort of thing.
And is that so is that basically your experience that you have in working with the sound and audio, or I'm sorry, sound and video?
I have quite a few Emmy Awards from the National Associations of Television Arts and Sciences, actually quite a slew of them for technical and audio video expertise. I've also won audio awards, the gold at the Cannes Film Festival for audio, as well as the Calgary Film Festival for audio. I've worked a lot in television for, in the film industry for companies like NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, BBC, Fox, DreamWorks, Screen Gems Films, Touchstone, LucasArts, Universal Studios, Lorimar, Trimark, Gannett, there's quite a few.
All right, and so is this what you've been doing for the past 32 years?
Yes, that, and also we do quite a bit of audio work for audio that's been damaged from television shows that needs to be fixed. But for example, most of our work is legal. We've done over 200 cases in the last 36 months, worked on evidence in over 200 cases.
And have you been certified as a forensic expert?
Yes,
In
in
what?
federal, state, civil, and aviation, and military.
Courts?
Yes.
Okay. Were you retained on this case?
Yes.
And what were you asked to do? What did you do?
I was retained back in September, I believe September 15th of 2010, and I was asked to enhance an audio recording that was made from a telephone where the person speaking on the phone had recorded the audio and the person on the other side could not be heard very well, so I was asked to clear it up and clean it up.
Okay. Can you walk us through the process of what you do in order to clean up audio?
Sure. Is there a way we could activate that computer?
Judge, the computer's on. There are some sonographs and things that I think will help demonstrate what Mr. Neumeister does. May I show this?
Approach, please.
I'm showing you exhibit, the marker identification is exhibit number 429.
Okay.
That's a DVD. Do you know what that contains?
Yes. It contains a number of screen grabs of the protocol we use for this particular job.
Okay, and when you talk about protocols, what does that mean?
We have to follow a certain set of standards to make sure we can reproduce the work, or another forensic agency can reproduce the work. So we basically catalog as we're going the steps we take.
All right, and is that what's contained on the DVD of exhibit 429?
Yes.
And did you create these?
Yes.
Judge, defense moved into evidence exhibit 429.
No objection.
429 is admitted.
All right, and is what's in exhibit 429, is that currently on your computer?
Yes.
Okay, and so for ease of process, Judge, if I can, rather than pop the DVD and use the computer.
You may.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, the first screen I received from Mr. Nurmi's office was a recording. There were actually 7 recordings from a telephone, and I was asked to clean them up. Before we can clean them up, we have to figure out what frequencies we need to work with. So if you look at the human voice goes from about 300 hertz to about 4,000 hertz speech range, from the lows to the highs, but there are sibilants or transients like st, or those kind of words like st, that can go up to 9,000 hertz. So when we're going to enhance a bit of audio, we need to first look at it physically on a graph to figure out what frequencies we have to work with. This particular audio recording was taken analog, which means out of an earphone jack, into a digital recorder as an MP3 file at a bit rate of 128 kilobytes per second, which is not a particularly good quality, but it's adequate for human voice. So what we determine here, you'll see a little yellow line called the Nyquist theorem, and that means that the sample rate was fairly low. I'm going to be very generic on this. The sample rate is very low, which means the sibilance is going to be very low on this particular recording. So you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
The next, again, looks at what's called a spectrograph. And again, you can see the top audio frequencies are topping out around 4,000 hertz. It may be difficult to see, but what that means is a lot of the sibilants and transient things that make speech very understandable are missing. So we realize that we have to clean it up a bit and enhance it. And what I learned from looking at that recording is that the recording on the telephone was made at about 8 kilohertz, which was the sample rate. And again, this is just for the record. You may not understand it, or you can ask questions, and I'd be happy to answer it. But basically, in plain English, it's not a very good recording. So my job was to make it basically more intelligible. So let's go to the next slide. This real quickly, I'm just looking at how I'm going to change the audio to better work with. We changed the file from using a process called isotope. We changed it from a wave MP3 file into a 44.1 24-bit wave file, and you can see the noise kind of on the top and on the bottom. And when you go to the next slide, you can see that a lot of that noise has gone away. Can you go back to the previous slide just by hitting the opposite arrow? Look on the top above the orange, the noise that's up there. It's a little difficult to see on that graph, but then go to the next one. And what I've done is I've narrowed the voice frequency between 300 hertz and 3,400 hertz, and that's a pretty good range to work with for the human voice. Next slide. Since it was made from a cell phone, the audio was taken into a product called DC8 Live Forensics, where I eliminated some of the noises and background hum and stuff that is associated with cell phones. So, some of the noise you might get behind your cell phone, some of the white noise or buzz, that was eliminated using that process. Next slide. Here, because we were limited to some of the sibilants that I talked about earlier, the S sounds and whatever, we used a little bit of what's called a vocal enhancer to bring up the kind of, I'll simply say the treble, so that it's easier to understand what people are saying. Next slide. And finally, just before we finalize it, we use a computer algorithm to remove the remaining background hiss or noise that would be on a recording. And next slide. And finally, in order to bring up Mr. Alexander's voice to that of Miss Arias' voice, we use a program called Waves Compression, where we can bring the voices to be equal. Because very often, if it's a telephone recording, the person speaking is very loud, and the person on the other end, it's very hard to hear. So in order to make it so that you can hear it better, we normalize it and make it so that the audio files or the voice tracks are of equal decibel level. That's it.
The last slide?
That's all I needed right there.
Oh, okay. Ultimately, when you finished enhancing this audio, did you put it onto a DVD?
Yes, I didn't show that because what I did is I added a time code. Now, a time code's for the jury. What it is when you're listening to audio, it's kind of boomy in here. You don't get the best acoustics. So there's a running number on the screen that you can refer to in your notes. Like you'll say, I wonder what he said there, and you write it down, and later if you ask, I can go back and replay that piece of audio because there's a time marker that you'll be able to see playing. It's called a time code. And I don't believe that's been entered in yet, so I didn't bring a slide for that. But that was the final process, was to take the audio and put a time code on it so the jury could, if they had questions, identify parts of the audio they had questions with.
All right, and so a time code is just something you added, just timing the call, or timing the audio.
Correct. It's just it's a running linear number, and it's basically for the jury's reference.
All right, and was there any identifying information on this audio?
Pardon?
Was there any identifying information on this audio?
Can you be a little bit more specific?
How many people are talking?
2.
And does one person ever refer to the other?
Yes, the male refers to himself as Mr.
Sustained.
Judge may reproach.
You may. Objection overruled. You may continue.
All right, and when you finished, well, let me go back to that question. Does the male ever refer to the female by name?
Yes.
What does he call her?
He refers 3 times using the name Jodi.
Okay, and does the female ever refer to the male by name?
Yes.
And what does she call him?
She refers to the name Travis twice on the tape, and he refers to himself as Mr. Alexander.
Okay. When you finished your enhancement of the audio, did you give it back to Mr. Nurmi and myself?
Yes.
How did you give it to us?
I put it on DVD with the time code.
Okay. Judge may approach?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 428. Is that the DVD that you gave to us that has the audio captured on it?
There was actually, on Thursday, I just want to clarify, Thursday I did bring in a DVD that had 7 clips on it, and it was agreed by all parties to redact 2 clips. So this is the modified DVD that has 5 of the 7 original clips that I received.
Okay, and is exhibit 428 the one that has 5 clips on it?
If this is the one I brought in today, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you, Judge. Nothing further.
May we approach, please?
You may.
The extra 2 clips, those have nothing to do with this case, is that correct?
I believe both counsel said that it didn't have anything to do with this case and that
Right.
it should be stricken.
So there was no reason for you to do it, to have it on the DVD?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
It did not
thank you.
affect, it was not part of this case.
Okay, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Sir, with regard to this particular DVD, you keep referring to counsel. It's true that the parties, including the state, agreed that the two individuals on there were Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias, correct?
Correct.
And with regard to your examination was restricted to Mr. Travis Alexander's voice, comparing that to a known sample, right? Did you compare Mr. Alexander's voice on that DVD to his known sample?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
Early on.
Yes or no?
Yes, early on.
With regard to the defendant, you didn't make that same type of comparison, though, did you?
That's correct.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Redirect. Any questions from the jury for this witness? I see no hands. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you very much.
You may. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you go back to the jury room for approximately 3 minutes and then return. Please remember the admonition. Please be seated. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Wilmot, the images on the screen.
Mr. Newman.
Thank you. Yes. Ms. Arias, you may come forward and take a seat, please. All right, you can line the jury up. Line up the jury.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nurmi,
I believe Ms. Harris needs to be sworn.
calling your client.
Yes, the defense calls Jodi Arias.
Ms. Arias, please stand to be sworn.
Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated. You may proceed.
Thank you, Honor. Hi, Jodi.
Hi.
How are you feeling right now?
Nervous.
I want to ask you, well, let me ask you this. Is this a position you ever thought you would find yourself in, testifying here today?
The objection.
Relevance.
Approach, please.
Let me ask you a couple of important questions before we get back and start talking about who you are and why you're here, okay?
Okay.
Did you kill Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008?
Yes, I did.
Why?
The simple answer is that he attacked me, and I defended myself.
Okay. It was also brought up during these proceedings that you gave an interview with Inside Edition. Do you remember seeing that tape?
Yes, I do.
And in that tape you said that no jury would convict you, something to that effect. Do you remember seeing that? Remember saying that?
Yeah, I did say that.
Why?
I made that statement in September 2008, I believe it was. And at the time I had plans to commit suicide. So I was extremely confident that no jury would convict me because I didn't expect any of you to be here. I didn't expect to be here, so I could have easily said no jury would acquit me either. I couldn't say that though because there was an officer sitting 5 feet behind me, and had I told them the reason no jury would convict me at that time, I would have been thrown into a padded cell and stripped down, and that would have been my life for a while until I stabilized. So I was very confident that no jury would convict me because I planned to be dead. Probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said those are probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
Ms. Arias, I want to clarify another thing as well when we're talking here. Your name has been pronounced in most of this trial Arias. Is there another way of pronouncing it? Have you always pronounced it Arias?
I've heard it pronounced about 7 different ways. I say Arias, as does the rest of my family.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit and then talk about your family. Who's in your immediate family?
My immediate family consists of... I'm the oldest of my parents. They also had another son about 2 years after I was born, my brother. And then I have another younger sister and another younger brother. I also have an older sister from a previous marriage of my father's.
Okay. So let me see if well, first of all, what are the names of your parents?
Bill and Sandy Arias.
Okay. And are they still married at this time?
Yes,
Okay.
about 33 years.
Okay. And you said you were the oldest child of Bill and Sandy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a half-sister that is older than you, is that right?
Yes, she's 5 years older than me.
Okay. And that is your father's daughter?
Yes, from a previous marriage.
Okay. And you have a brother that's 2 years younger than you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what is his name?
His name is Carl.
And you mentioned I believe the next youngest would have been another sister. What was her name?
Angela.
Okay. And your youngest brother, who is he?
Joseph.
Okay. And just so we get a bit of separation, how much younger than you is Angela?
Angela was born when I was 11, and Joseph was born when I was 13.
And what year were you born?
1980.
Do you remember where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in a few different cities. I was born in Salinas, California, and I lived there until I was almost 12.
Okay. And what was life like in Salinas?
For the first years of my life, it was really good.
When you say that, before you continue, let's clarify. What do you mean by first years?
I would say until about age 7, it was a fairly ideal childhood.
Okay, different people have different meanings when they say ideal, so why don't you describe for us what you mean by ideal childhood?
I have predominantly positive memories of my childhood at that time. My brother and I lived when I was about 4 years old, we moved to a house in a cul-de-sac. We had the center lot, so it was a huge backyard, and we had a lot of places to play there. There were trees to climb. There were other kids in the neighborhood and in the cul-de-sac that we played with. We were close in age, so my family traveled a lot. We went camping. We went to all the theme parks in California.
Did you go to school?
Of course, yes, I went to school.
And you went to grade school in Salinas then?
Yes, I went to a private school for about 3 years and then a public school.
Were you and Carl in school together, or did you go to different schools?
We were in school together. I was held back in kindergarten, so even though we're 2 years apart, he was only 1 grade behind me.
And tell us about your parents at that time, to your recollection. Were they both working? Was your mom at home? Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I was younger, I remember my mom used to work, I guess she was working as a server with my dad. He owned restaurants my whole life. And then when I was around 11 or 12, she became a dental assistant.
Okay. And you mentioned your life was, well, let me ask you a question. Do you remember what your interests were as a child?
Yes, I had pets, cats, dog, fish. I had a rat. I loved animals. We had a lot of pets. My brother had frogs, things like that. We played a lot of hopscotch and two-square when we were younger. We went roller skating. They didn't really have rollerblades yet, or at least that we used. We rode bikes a lot. We did a lot of camping. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the question.
Okay. All right. Well, you're speaking very quietly. Are you nervous today?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
What's that?
Yes,
Okay.
very nervous.
Could you do me a favor and pull the mic a little closer to you? Jodi, one of the things that you said a couple questions ago when we were speaking is that your life was pretty ideal up until about age 7. Is something different after age 7, or?
It seemed like, well, my parents would just, spank us or hit us as discipline, so it seemed like at age 7, around then, it started getting a little bit more intense. That's something I remember.
Okay. You said they started spanking you.
Well, I was spanked before on occasion, just it seemed like the frequency and the intensity of it increased around that age.
What do you mean by that, frequency and intensity?
Well, just, there were, I think that's the first year my dad started using a belt. My mom began to carry a wooden spoon in her purse.
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
May we approach?
You may.